We know that despotic forms of government dismiss the significance and value of individual human lives. Today, we'll explore some implications of a government's dismissal of the right to life. Brian Johnston is the Western Director of the National Right to Life Committee. He has served in many capacities while advocating for innocent lives, as California Commissioner on Aging, as Chairman of the California Pro-Life Council, on the board of the National Legal Center for the Medically Dependent and Disabled. And now here's our host, Brian Johnston.
Welcome back to Life Matters, your program on the right to life, on the culture that has emanated from that idea. And it's a very specific idea that every human being is endowed by their Creator with the right to be alive. And that the government didn't give you that right, and you obviously didn't make yourself. So the government has a duty to protect your right to live, that you're alive. That's the purpose of the right to life. It's a statement, an assertion of a principle on which our nation was built. But this idea existed before our nation. It goes back through Western civilization, and there's a culture that has emanated from that idea that human beings have significance. That culture and that idea is under attack right now. The idea that human beings are significant. The idea that human beings aren't just merely animals. We're as significant as any animal. Therefore, don't be full of yourself. You're obviously thinking in an old-fashioned way. This whole idea that human beings should be protected individually under the law. That's an antiquated idea. Society needs to change. Society needs to have new values where we can dismiss certain human beings. This is a battle of ideas, and it's on us right now, and it's manifested in various forms. We're going to talk about one of those in particular today. In fact, we're going to talk about a personage in our culture that has come to embody one of those ideas, the idea of feminism. And we'll talk a bit about that. What is radical feminism? But in particular, we're going to talk about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. There's a film coming out about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the Supreme Court Justice. It's fashioning her as an icon. In fact, it's almost presenting her as a holy person. Now, those of you who hear this program on Christian radio stations, and we do play on some Christian radio stations, you know that what holy really means is not squeaky clean. That isn't what holy means. Holy means set aside for a particular purpose. Set aside for a sole purpose. That's what holy means. And in a sense, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is being exalted as a holy justice who is wholly given over to certain ideas, and in particular, the change in society surrounding the idea of radical feminism. Now, you're going to see in this movie, I haven't seen it, but I have read what the producers have put out. The movie premiered at Sundance, but it's getting a lot of coverage now because of the place of Ruth Bader Ginsburg in the news. But Ruth Bader Ginsburg has been set up as an icon of a culture. And one of the things that I find extraordinary is that really her ideas aren't new at all. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is not actually original in her thinking. She's actually mouthing the words and the ideologies of a culture that she has immersed herself in. And this is a culture that you are now facing. You know, one of the things they're saying about how noble she is that in 1956, she was one of only 9 women who were allowed entrance into Harvard Law School. She is cutting edge. But in fact, long before that, Mildred Jefferson, former president of the National Right to Life Committee, was the first black woman to be allowed to graduate from Harvard Medical School in 1951. Now, if anyone was cutting edge, it would in fact be Mildred Jefferson. Mildred Jefferson paid a price, not only because of the color of her skin, but because of her gender. And I would think if you're celebrating gender rights and really rooting for those who are oppressed, Mildred Jefferson would be a cultural hero. And to me, she is. I had the benefit of meeting her, and while on the board of National Right to Life, our terms overlapped. She made a point of befriending me. Mildred is a heroic woman. And if you haven't heard much about Mildred Jefferson, you're not going to hear it from the dominant media. She has not been lionized because she stood for basic principles and truth. She stood for the values of Western civilization itself. She stood for the value of the human person. She was eloquent and wise. She was a unique woman, an extraordinary woman. And if you'd like to go back, we have a program on her. Go to lifematters.life to our podcast page, and there's a whole program dedicated to the unique person that Mildred Jefferson was. Up until that time, Mildred Jefferson was the only black woman to graduate from Harvard Medical School. And that was before Ruth Bader Ginsburg was allowed in 1956, one of 9 women. What we want to say about Ruth Bader Ginsburg is that her ideas, in fact, are the reiteration of a cultural value that already existed long before her. And in fact, these ideas have been in place for a while and have gained ascendancy. She is mouthing the zeitgeist. What is the zeitgeist? Zeitgeist is the spirit of the time. It's a German word. Zeit is time, and Geist is the word for spirit or ghost. In German, der Heilige Geist is the Holy Ghost or the Holy Spirit. So the German word for the spirit of the times is the Zeitgeist. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg simply mouthed and gave voice to ideas that were all around her anyways. And her creativity, in fact, is anything but creative. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, about the ideas of radical feminism.
People ask me, when would you be satisfied with the number of women on the court? When there are 9.
As you know, radical feminism views babies as disposable. This has become a very common issue now. Very few people understand where it came from and why it's being implemented. It is actually out to end Western civilization as we know it. That may seem like an overstatement. It's not. You'll find out when we talk about the roots of these ideas and how Bader Ginsburg really is a mouthpiece from very old ideas that not only have been proven wrong, but incredibly destructive and dismissive, not only of babies in the womb, but of society itself and an ordered culture that allows people to be free. She actually inadvertently, and this is the case with a lot of culture warriors, she inadvertently is bringing in a whole train of destructive ideas that follow in the wake of dismissing the right to life as a foundational idea. So we'll be right back. We'll talk about the zeitgeist of radical feminism. Where did it come from? We'll talk about the movie coming out, and we'll talk about the individual, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who is now a holy woman of radical feminism.
You're listening to Life Matters.
Hi, I'm Kevin Sorbo, and I was very excited when I heard about LifeFest Film Festival. LifeFest is the film festival dedicated to showcasing films that affirm the intrinsic worth of innocent human life and the profound significance of each life. One seemingly insignificant person can in fact change the whole world in which he or she lives. That one singular life ends up being of vital importance. I'm so glad to hear that you are cherishing that in this film festival and are committed to artfully and creatively protect the lives of those who can't possibly promote themselves.
Life Film Fest is dedicated to bring the message of life to Hollywood and to our culture. Go to lifefilmfest.com and get your tickets now. That's lifefilmfest.com.
Find out about the exciting cultural change impacting Hollywood. Go to lifefilmfest.com. And now back to more Life Matters with Brian Johnston.
Welcome back to Life Matters. We're your program on the culture of life and the battle of ideas. It's a very important battle, and you need to be prepared for it. Today we're talking about some of the ideas that are current, and there's a phrase for that, the zeitgeist, one of the popular ideas that inhabit the culture and that are expected of people. You're expected that if you're a member of this culture, you need to adopt these ideas. That's the zeitgeist, the spirit of the times. And you're familiar with this. You see it all around. You've seen it in your own life that certain people expect you to believe a certain way because the culture believes these things. One of those of course, is the idea of choice, the idea of abortion on demand, but that comes from a larger idea in radical feminism. We're going to talk a little bit now about radical feminism. Where did it come from? What are its origins? And believe it or not, its origins are rather, how shall I say, dark. That is to say that it's actually Marxism and Marxist ideology that sets up this conflict. If you've studied Marx, you know that Marxism is based on conflict. There's cultural conflict, and it's through this conflict that history has moved forward, what's known as the dialectic. And part of the conflict, of course, has been about money, and so capitalism is a great evil which must be opposed in Marxism, and those with power, they must be brought low. That's part of the conflict of Marxist thinking. But there's a whole lot more. If you've studied sociology, then you're probably familiar with the fact that sociology, in many ways, is a stepchild of Marxism. Yes, that's right. That society is flawed and that society needs to be fixed. That there are oppressors in society and we need to remove their oppression if we want justice. And therefore, this group, again, they don't treat people as individuals, it's as groups. This group, and if you're a member of this oppressive group, then watch out because you must be brought low. So sociology has adopted this Marxist worldview, this struggle, this conflict, which is the heart of life and which is moving history forward. But there's more. That's right. The initial conflict for many Marxists is actually that between men and women. That's right. The whole idea of marriage. Marriage is a terrible idea. It's a patriarchal view of life and society. And let me quote for you from the Communist Manifesto of 1848. The bourgeois sees in his wife a mere instrument of production. He hears that under communists, the instruments of production are to be exploited in common, and naturally can come to no other conclusion that the lot of being common to all will likewise fall to women. Oh, but no. Marx and Engels are much more specific about the war between men and women that Marxism wants to promote. They go on and say, he is not even a suspicion that the real point aimed at in communism is to do away with the status of women as instruments of production. So, a very interesting idea from Karl Marx that this whole marriage arrangement in Western society has been oppressive to women. Now, you're starting to hear that a lot more, and specifically from a certain woman on the U.S. Supreme Court, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We talked about the fact that there's a movie out lionizing her as a brilliant new thinker, very cutting edge. But in fact, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is simply rehashing and reiterating what is really a Marxist worldview. A Marxist worldview of the relationship between the sexes, of the war between the sexes, so to speak, and this conflict. And the way to remove this conflict is to tear down. This is her teachings. She herself was successfully married. But the problem is that very often the ideas that someone perpetuates, the ideas that are put into action, and when you're a Supreme Court justice, you're in a position to put ideas into action. We're in a battle of ideas. So radical feminism is dedicated to a war between men and women. It's got to be fixed because men are oppressors, and patriarchy and the love of money. And usually they'll throw race in white patriarchs, white men, because of the formula of racism. As I mentioned earlier, there is other women. There are many women who have done very, very well. They're not lionized by radical feminists because they don't share radical feminist values. Ruth Bader Ginsburg did. You're going to hear a quote in a little bit from Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and you may be surprised that Ruth Ginsburg did not agree with the Roe versus Wade decision. She, in fact, would like to see it overturned. Why? She's concerned it was bad law, not because it legalized abortion. She's concerned that it wasn't well thought through. She would like to see Roe versus Wade overturned and put on an entirely different foundation. See, Roe v. Wade, and go back and listen to our program on Roe or read up on Roe. Roe overturned the laws of all 50 states, even the most liberal states, and forced them to have abortion in their states, unlimited abortion, in the name of privacy. And therein is the rub. As a lawyer, Ginsburg saw that this was a bad legal foundation. She wants Roe overturned, but wants a new abortion right established on the basis of gender rights. And as you know, that's the zeitgeist now. Gender war is the real conflict. And a good ideologue wants to see abortion permanent, but on the basis of gender rights, because only women can have children. And so we see that time and again in Marxist thinking that the burden bearing children is too onerous and that a woman should only have that if she wants it. Therefore, she should be free to eliminate that baby from her life. This is at the very heart of the struggle of Marxist ideology.
Better to go step by step and have a series of decisions rather than have one decision that made every law of every state, even the most liberal, unconstitutional. Too giant a stride. There are many people who disagree with me, who say that the backlash would have occurred in any event, and we will never know.
So it's pretty stunning to hear Ruth Bader Ginsburg actually talk down Roe v. Wade. But it's not because she doesn't love abortion. She views abortion as an absolute necessity so that a woman can control her life by controlling the life of that baby in the womb. She still views babies as chattel. She just understands, just as a previous Supreme Court justice understood, who was also a woman, Sandra Day O'Connor, both of them understood that Roe is really bad legal thinking. Sandra Day O'Connor, in a famous dissent in the Casey decision, she said that Roe versus Wade has no foundation in either law or logic. Now, actually, Sandra Day O'Connor, she was the first woman on the Supreme Court. She should be much more vaunted and honored by feminists. But the reason she's not? She doesn't have the right ideology. It isn't the fact that she's a woman. For them, feminism is not about women. It's about ideology. You need to understand that. You need to understand the real battle that's going on, the battle of ideas. It's all around you. They care about ideas and ideology more than anything else. And if that ideology destroys human beings, that's okay. That's what the choice ideology does. Back to Marxist thinking, Marx actually is the one that's promoted this. It's not that this hasn't been done before. Unthinking people have been willing to destroy and kill other human beings. The problem with Marxism and other forms of ideology is that they want this to be in the law. The law is merely ideas that are enforced. So the legalization of abortion through Roe v. Wade, we know this. We know that Roe, as Sandra Day O'Connor said, it has no foundation in either law or logic. It will be overturned. The question you now have is what will happen? We'll have the right and the obligation to see that those children are protected. Are you ready for that battle? Make sure that you get ready. Make sure that you understand the battle we're in right now. I want to go back to Ruth Bader Ginsburg and radical feminism in particular. While Bader Ginsburg has come to be lionized, she really was merely repeating a cultural value that was not new to her in any way. It was new in the 50s and 60s because Marxist thinking was not yet popularized. It is popularized now, and you're hearing a lot of it now about gender and gender wars and confused way of thinking about gender that actually emanates from a Marxist worldview, has been put into school thinking. A lot of schools think this way, and it's because of Marxist ideology. You may not know, obviously, if you are familiar with this battle, that the Communist Manifesto, you probably knew that was written in 1848. That was Marx and Engels. They worked together for a long, long time. Marx passed away, but after his death, Engels continued to write, and he wrote a book, The Origin of the Family, Private Property, and the State. He published it in 1884, but he actually had worked on it with Marx. And in that, he blames the family, that children are raised in families. So there's a very serious assault on both the individual. In Marx, human individuals are actually insignificant. In the American founding, the values of Western civilization were made significant. And what are those values? That human beings are significant. Individual human lives are significant. Your life and my life. That's at the heart of Western civilization. That's what has allowed the appreciation of the arts and of creativity and of laws that protect the values of individual and the hard work of individuals. It doesn't belong to the group and the culture. That individual created that thing. The creativity that has come from the right to life is immeasurable. The values in the culture that has come from the assertion of a right to life are absolutely foundational. They're under attack. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg is one of the leaders. She has been one of the leaders by giving voice to that attack. I don't think she should be honored as a creative thinker. This is the regurgitation of collectivist thinking, of a collectivist worldview that was best stated by Marx. He romanticized it. And today, this Marxist thinking is now dominant. It's part of the zeitgeist. It's part of the culture of the times. If you can't see through it, you're going to get stuck as someone gets stuck in flypaper. It's very attractive emotionally. We should share. He's part of a group. That group is a terrible group. It needs to be limited. This group has been oppressed. We need to give them more freedoms. Groupthink, as opposed to the value of the individual person. Groupthink is at the heart of collectivist Marxism, and it denigrates the human person. You can go back, and there's been books written, many books that have come out of that view of life. Remember, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, that would be something right out of The Origin of the Family, private property in the state, written in 1884 by Engels with help from Marx. No, those ideas are common, and they're being pushed on you, that human individual lives are not really that significant if they can be considered disposable. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg was at the cutting edge of that. Ruth Bader Ginsburg has come to represent radical feminism and really what is radical Marxism. That human beings as individuals aren't that significant, that causes and groups and ideology must be implemented instead, even at the cost of individual human lives. We're in a battle. In this battle, human lives really are at stake. It's not just a metaphor. Even though we're talking about ideas, it doesn't seem like anyone's hurt when you talk about ideas. When you put them into law, people are hurt. They're killed. Laws are ideas that are enforced. In our Supreme Court justice, we're certainly hoping that whoever replaces Ruth Bader Ginsburg will honor the Constitution, will honor the concept, the premise, the idea that there's a right to life for every individual. Instead of substituting an ideology and superimposing that over the Constitution, if we want to live in freedom and if we want to protect the lives of those that cannot protect themselves, we have to assert that right to life. That's the reason we're here. I want to urge you to be involved wherever you are. Support your local Right to Life affiliate. Get involved, make a difference. Life matters, and that includes yours. Your life matters. You're not just a lone voice in a crowd. Actually, the dominant media culture wants to crush your voice. Stand up and speak for those who can't speak for themselves. We're urged to do that, by the way, in scriptures. If you believe the scriptures, we're urged to speak for those who can't speak for themselves in Proverbs 24:11, and hold them back if they're being drawn to death. Don't say you don't know it. Don't pretend you don't see it, because God knows. And the fact is, we're made by God, and we will be held accountable. That's just one of the facts of life, and it's a self-evident truth. So life goes on, and we want you to participate in this great battle, in the struggle of ideas.
You're listening to Life Matters.
Life Film Fest is the creative outreach in Hollywood that's changing Hollywood and the culture. There's many films you've already seen that actually had their start at Life Fest in Hollywood, their premiere. But more than that, we work with people throughout the industry who want to creatively bring the message of life. Not just hit you over the head with it or preach to you about it, but creatively impact the culture so that the hearts and minds of our fellow citizens understand the depth and the breadth and the warp and the woof of what the right to life really is. Be part of Life Fest Film Festival and make a difference.
Every life does matter. Every life is significant. Find out about the exciting cultural change impacting Hollywood. Go to lifefilmfest.com. And now back to more Life Matters with Brian Johnston.
Well, as we wrap up our discussion of radical feminism and that leader, at least culturally and in terms of government power, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, as sitting in the highest tribunal of our nation, the impact of radical feminism is being felt across our culture, and it comes in many forms. I would like to point out that when it comes to marriage, that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was married, and apparently she loved her husband. I'm not denigrating that. And in fact, when we talk about ideas, we're not picking on people. Our battle is not against persons. I would probably enjoy Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I know that Justice Scalia did. They would hang out together and apparently went to the opera together. So I am not slighting any one individual, but I will feel free to criticize deadly ideas, particularly because ideas have consequences. And we're in a battle of ideas right now. Consequences are at stake. And in this battle, lives are at stake. So calling it a battle isn't merely a stretched metaphor. We're battling for human lives. And in America, we have been blessed with ideas that were put into our laws and into our foundational way of living as a culture and society. And the first and foremost is that we have a right to be alive, and that a just government will protect the lives, but remember, particularly the lives of the most vulnerable. And it's because of that premise that we were able to go back, and people like Lincoln and other folks who were so upset about slavery, we were able to go back and remove slavery because that was an errant idea that violated the right to life. Abraham Lincoln literally said that. It violated their right to life. We're looking at the same thing now in our culture. Is it half of our culture that's pro-slavery? Is it half of our culture or more that's pro-abortion on demand? We must address this. We must explain to people why these ideas are in error. We need to do so lovingly. Again, I know feminists, and I'm more than happy to respect them as human beings. But I feel an obligation, as I'm sure you do, to examine and to make sure that the ideas they would like to put into law are not accepted as a culture when it means killing human beings. Thanks for listening.
Learn more about everything in today's show online at lifematters.life, where you'll find all the resources you need to protect life. Life Matters is a production of the California Pro-Life Council, the state affiliate of National Right to Life.